Good evening, everyone. My name is Abhishek Jain, and I'm pleased to invite you all to the fellowship series by Planty. Today, we will be covering the Teach for India Fellowship. Towards the end of this session, we will also be having a Q&A session for which I would request you all to put your questions in the live chat box. We're very fortunate to have with us Roop Kunwar Singh, a graduate of the 2016 batch from Shriram College of Commerce affiliated to Delhi University. He then went on to pursue and secure the prestigious Teach for India Fellowship from 2016 to 2018. Thereafter, he worked as an associate school leader at Teach for India until 2020. He is currently an associate at the Chief Minister's Good Governance Associates Program. In tonight's session, Roop will be speaking in detail on the application process to the TFI Fellowship, as well as the opportunities that are available both during and after completing this fellowship. I would now like to hand it over to Roop to begin this session.
Thank you so much, Abhishek. I'm audible, right?
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah. So, as Abhishek said, I was a teacher and a fellow from 2016 to 2018 in Delhi. I taught in a government school in Mori Gate, which is near the Kashmiri Gate metro station. Those 2 years and even after, 2 years after that as an assistant school leader were very, very important parts of my life. Those 2 years have taught me a lot and I cherish that experience a lot. So I'm very glad to be talking about the fellowship today, the fact that I got a chance to talk about the fellowship as such. I'll get on it right away. Teach for India is essentially a leadership development program. That's how it is envisioned. It's a 2-year journey to explore the education space and understand the challenges that constitute the humongous educational gap in our society. That's how at least it is envisioned to be. As a fellow, you basically get a classroom, which could be any classroom from grade 1 to grade 10. And in a gist, you are, you're teaching them and everything. You're teaching them certain subjects, English, social science, maths. But in a gist, you're responsible for the holistic development of those 40 to 50 children that are given to you. With that, you basically have the chance, and it's not that you're supposed to be just working on the academic aspect. The way the fellowship is structured, you have the chance and are actually encouraged to work on systemic changes as well, and not just academic outcomes of the children. When I say systemic changes, it means that actually going out there, being in that school and trying to affect a much more larger landscape than just your one classroom. That could be your, say, five other classroom in your school. That could be your whole school, or maybe even the whole block you're working at. So that's how the fellowship is structured, envisioned actually. And in terms of the long-term vision, they basically, the fellowship gives you a platform to really set up your own vision as well, your own vision, your own theory of change, and your own plan for affecting the system, and use that platform to go on and stay in the system, and then really become a proponent of change on your very own. Talking about, how the structure is, the fellowship starts with a month-long induction, which usually happens in Pune, and that induction is a world in itself. Those 300-400 like-minded people with passion, some people who are just exploring, some people who are a little confused, and I was one of them, and people with a lot of energy. Really brimming with energy. I won't be the best example of that, but genuinely this organization, I don't know if it attracts that sort of people, or it sort of infuses that high energy into people. So that's how it starts. And then once it's Teach for India Fellowship is in 7 cities at the moment, which include Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, Hyderabad, Ahmedabad, Bangalore, and I think I missed one. And the way it is structured, you are placed in one of these cities, and once you're into the city, you have your school team, other fellows who might be teaching other classrooms or probably doing subject teaching along with you. You have your program manager, a person whose sole job is to look after your development. I mean that in itself exemplifies the commitment of Teach for India towards the development of their fellows itself. And of course, then there is the whole staff in the city uh, who are constantly, while also supporting you in your day-to-day work, but at the same time also ensuring that you do not forget the bigger picture, the bigger system that you are working within. uh, that's pretty much about the structure. And of course then other than that, you have your children. They sort of become your children very soon into the fellowship. I wouldn't like to, I think I can talk endlessly about that, so I'll just shelf that for the moment. And then of course you end up meeting with a lot of government school teachers and principals who working with whom breaks a lot of stereotypes that any sort of urban child would have about the whole government schooling system. I was very lucky to have gotten in a school which had an exemplar leader as a principal. Learned a lot from him as well. And other than that, of course, there is a very important element to the fellowship is the community visits and immersion. The fellowship encourages you to really, I mean, visit the community your children, the children you will be teaching are coming from, and immerse yourself to understand what sort of backgrounds they're coming from, which in itself is a very critical factor in determining what sort of learning they end up getting. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much about the fellowship in term of it. As I've been constantly saying, and I genuinely would concur with the fact that Teach for India fellowship is set up for the learning of the fellows more than probably it is for the learning of the children. There are a lot of skills that you learn. Planning, stakeholder management are two very essential skills to be in development sector. And Teach for India fellowship ingrains these two skills into you. Uh, Whether in terms of your lesson planning, your unit planning, or probably that whole holistic aspect of planning. Uh, I mean, in terms of my own learning as well, I think planning and facilitation were two skills that I really got to work on within this fellowship. And other than that, I mean, at the same time, there are a lot of structures in the fellowship that they give you to be able to, so that you don't end up going blank once you go to your school or your classroom. But at the same time, there's a very neat balance that allows a lot of room for freedom as well. That allows you to work on things that you're really passionate about as well. So, I mean, the learnings I mentioned, that those are sort of uniform, but other than that, based on whatever priorities you choose to work upon, you undertake, there is other learning that that the fellowship really gives you the freedom to design for your own self. So yeah, that's pretty much that. I mean, when I talk about skills, but from my own experience, I think more than the skills, it's the mindset that the fellowship allows you to mold, or probably the perspective that it gives you, that is so much more valuable, according to, in my opinion. I mean, you get a very strong reality check of how the ground reality of our whole society is, to be honest. And the fellowship also gives you a very systemic lens to problems. I mean, as a graduate student, I mean, while I was graduating or even before that, I know that I used to look at problems from a very linear lens, and which is quite natural when you are not operating from within the system. For instance, and the fellowship really changes that. It allows you to look at how the whole problem is sort of a wicked problem which has so many dimensions to it, that you realize that there is a lot of systemic factors at work. For instance, I mean, children not coming to school was a big issue, and any layperson would go and say that, oh, universal education, right to education, is a clear-cut solution to it, and uh, it's a no-brainer. But what you realize once you're in the system is ki what universal education brings is there are a lot of multiple. I mean, how do I put it? Consequence would be a wrong word, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of collateral consequences for any solution that you might think. Yeah, children not coming to school, you bring about universal education. You bring all children to school, but you don't. But then you realize that these are children who are not school ready. They've not attended pre-primary education, and you're suddenly bringing them to third grade. So they are fidgety. They have so much energy. They want to move around, which brings a lot of issues that teachers, for being able to make those children study, end up resorting to corporal punishment, which brings about CPP issues, which makes you think maybe they were better off outside the school rather than inside the school. So that's the sort of systemic lens, or at least the questions that the fellowship makes you think about, at least. I mean, I gave you a very big scale example, but while you're in the fellowship, you come across these sort of systemic questions every day. So that's definitely there. I mean, other than that, because there's a lot of cross learning that you get in terms of the sort of people that you have around you, and more than that, I mean, it's a very uh, good space, or the way that has been the fellowship has been curated. It's a very good space for self exploration. I mean, there's something one of my managers had told me before I went into my classroom, that your classroom, your students will become a reflection of you. And that's very true. I found that out to be very true. And that gives you a very good place for self exploration. And other than that, I mean, you automatically, once you're aware of all these realities, it ingrains a lot of humility and a lot of perspective to inside you as well. I mean, I had a couple of children who I knew were not sure when they came to school in the morning if they will have their home at the same place where they left it in the morning once they've gone back in the afternoon. So, I mean, these sort of stories gives you a lot of perspective and humility in terms of looking at what really constitutes a problem. So, I mean, yeah, that's about my experience. Uh, I'll talk a little about the processes and the application process of the fellowship, and then probably I'll leave it to whatever questions you guys might have. So Teach for India Fellowship has a three-step selection process. It starts with quite an extensive application where you're required to submit a couple of essays, your resume, and a few, I mean, basic questions. So that's the first step. And there's also a small AMCAT test that you're supposed to give. These two process parts constitute the first step. If you're through this step, you go to the phone interview step, where there's a small 20 to 30-minute interview that is conducted over a phone call. And finally, if you clear that, then there's a whole day long assessment center, which is again divided into two parts. The first part constitutes of a teaching activity, then another aptitude test, and a group discussion, post which there are a few eliminations that happen right there itself, and those who are not eliminated qualify for a personal interview that happens on that day itself in the second half of the assessment center. So that is the gist of the application process. The application pretty much go about throughout the year, starting from July or August and going on till say March or April in 4 different windows. So if you're applying say in August, that whole cycle would be completed by if you're applying in July, that process will be completed by September. If you're applying in October, that window will be completed by December, and so on. So yeah, that is how the application process is structured. That's pretty much all that I had thought of talking about as such. Abhishek, I'm open to any sort of questions that might be there.
All right, wonderful. Firstly, thanks a lot for that session, Roop. I think that was a very, very good explanation, and also you mentioned your experience, which was great. So thanks a lot for that. So to move into the Q&A session for today, I think the first question that I have is just with respect to the fellowship in general, which is more about, so the TFI fellowship is a 2-year long commitment, and for a lot of students, that is a very, very long commitment straight out of their undergraduation. So, what are, let's say, the different activities, internships, or just the different kinds of things that they could do while they're in their undergraduation to actually figure out that, okay, this is something that I would want to do for 2 years and not regret it later?
Got it. I mean, Teach for India itself has a very extensive internship program. They're very open to any interested applicants for who in making them volunteer in the classrooms of fellows. I personally, in my 2 years, had about 7 to 8 different college students volunteer in my classroom. So I mean, and I was one fellow among 700 in a batch. So I mean, very open to that sort of sort of needs if that is there. Other than that, there are other organizations as well. There is MAD, there is Teach India. Who, to be absolutely honest, I don't have a first-hand experience of that, so I won't be able to tell you if they give you a similar experience. But yeah, I mean, Teach for India in itself has a very, very open mechanism for anyone who wishes to volunteer.
All right, that sounds great. My next question is, now I think I'm going to move into the whole application process. And as you mentioned, it's a very, very detailed process. So I think my first question is very specific to the resume. So what do you think are certain things that a student or an applicant should definitely have on their resume if they want to make the TFI?
I mean, that way TFI is, I mean, quite unique in the sense that they are looking for potential more than outcomes. In terms of they very Teach for India is very clear in terms that this is a leadership development program. Probably just I mean, even in terms of the fact that you can show a commitment to any sort of change in terms of whatever experiences in college and everything, I think that should in itself be do great. But no standardized expectations that Teach for India tends to have. Just if you can just probably through whatever activities that you have done in your college or post that in your work experience, that there is a commitment to change, or yeah, I mean, or even if you could within not within your resume, through your essay you can convey that, even that is taken as a very positive sign in Teach for India.
All right, thanks for that. You mentioned that there was another stage in the application process, which was basically the essay stage, and that's also something you mentioned just now. Could you elaborate a little bit about how this is something that one could draft well, and also to express a little bit about their personality?
I mean, there are a couple of essays. One talks about your personal experiences, and one talks about your motivation. I think the key, the way this whole fellowship is structured, I think the most critical element is genuineness. I mean, try to be as genuine as possible rather than trying to be all flashy over there. I know that when I read my essay that I wrote for the fellowship, I don't think any probably graduate college or probably any corporate would even look at my resume after reading that essay. But I know that it was accepted because I tried to be as genuine there as possible in terms of just trying to talk about how my experiences really shaped me. So don't have any other suggestion other than just being as genuine as possible.
Yep. I think that makes sense. Moving back to the resume just for a moment, since this session is specifically for an audience that is coming from, let's say, a background in either business or commerce, do you think that students coming from such a background have any kind of edge in this application process? And if yes, how could they capitalize on it?
Not necessarily. I mean, again, it's a very open process. Though the definitely, I mean, anyone coming from say a college with a good reputation tends to have an edge, and that's because sort of, I mean, uh, like any other organization, Teach for India has certain past experiences with certain candidates in terms of how they perform. So that automatically creates certain edge for certain colleges or institutions, but not a very strict not a very strict preference over there.
All right, that makes a lot of sense. You also mentioned that the second stage is where you have a 20 to 30 minute phone call with somebody. Could you elaborate a little bit about what are the questions that are asked in this telephonic interview and how you could prepare for this?
Right. I mean, it's quite similar to the essay questions. I mean, those two broad categories of how what are your past experiences in any work that you have done, and what are your motivations to join for the fellowship. It is pretty much a double check on the first stage to ensure that I mean the person. I mean, again, then that is where the genuineness factors become critical, because there you're actually answering the questions right away. So it sort of acts as a corroboration to your essays and to your resume. They try to make sure that you really know about what you talked about in your essays and your resume. So, I mean, the two broad categories and whatever you wrote on your resume and essay would basically form the base for that telephonic interview.
Understood. And now moving to the most interesting stage, which was the assessment center stage, which you mentioned was a complete full day process. So could you give us any general tips about how you could prepare for this or just anything about that?
Right. I mean, GD, I don't see that I need to give any much tips. It's a very standard GD. There's a sort of a scenario that you're given where you need to come to a consensus as a group. So any standard tips there for a GD. I mean, be attentive to others' opinion. Be firm with your opinion, but at the same time not overbearing with it. That sort of thing. In then the teaching activity, you actually get to you get a choice of subjects before 3 to 4 days before the assessment center itself. So I mean, would do good. Would did me good to really plan it well to absolute details. Teach for India as an organization is a very detail attentive organization and a very planning oriented organization as well. So be as planned as possible. Uh, I mean, I know that there are some people who prefer being more. I mean, how I'm missing the word that's there. Who prefer doing things in the moment, but I mean, it'll do good to anyone applying to be at least bit planned for that teaching activity. And the AMCAT is again not definitely not as rigorous as a CAD exam, but I mean the areas covered are pretty much the same. So anyone who's anyway studying for CAT or any similar competitive exam, the probably just need to refresh themselves on that. But anyone who's not done that probably will do you good to go through those curriculums.
All right. I think this brings me to my last question for today's session. So, after completing your 2 year fellowship, you continued to work with Teach for India. So, I wanted you to
Yeah.
elaborate a little bit about the opportunities that open up for an individual once they finish the fellowship.
Got it. So Teach for India has their own internal network, sort of an internal LinkedIn, which is called Teach for India Connect, and they also have a couple of career fairs that happen in January and February of the second year of the fellowship, where there are organizations that come in and hundreds of roles are opened up. I remember in our career fairs, I think if I combine the two career fairs, there are over 2 to 300 roles at least. I mean, I probably might be under calculating that, but there were that many openings that were available to all the fellows. And these organizations, of course, educate organizations working in the field of education have are more in number, but there were other organizations working in other verticals of the development sector, and of course, Teach for India have their own internal openings. Their staff openings at that point. That staff they have certain parallel projects going on. For instance, my role as an assistant school leader was one part of a larger project called the Alumni Incubator program, where Teach for India was trying to explore different roles in the system at school level, at policy level, at community level, and ASL was one of the roles that they had opened up. So, I mean, multiple opportunities that are available, and based on whatever your preference, your managers start working on helping you with your further career choices from the very beginning of the second year itself. I mean, they provide uh, any sort of support that you might think of for a career fair. For instance, support in preparing your CV, writing your cover letters, or anything like that. All sort of support is provided by the organization itself. Does that cover your question, Abhishek, or if so
Yep,
you want?
yep, yep, it definitely does. Thanks a lot for that, Roop. I think with that, I come to the end of tonight's session. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank you, Roop, for that wonderful session on behalf of Team Plant.
Thank you so much, Abhishek. I posted a link to the volunteering page of Teach for India on the comment box. That should help anyone looking to explore a volunteering opportunity. Uh, I mean, just I wanted to add a couple of concluding remarks in terms of who, I mean, who should really go ahead and apply for the fellowship. These are based on my own sort of biases, so I mean, I would prefer that everyone takes it with a pinch of salt and takes it as my opinion rather than hard facts. I mean, I genuinely feel that anyone looking to explore the education space in general, this is definitely a great opportunity for them. But at the same time, someone who's looking to explore their own interests, their own passions, and to really identify a purpose for themselves, I think for them also, this fellowship will provide an amazing opportunity. And of course, anyone who's looking to impact lives will definitely get to do that. Just a caveat, I mean, these sort of opportunities tend to be seen as very good places for getting degree credits. But to be absolutely honest, the fellowship is a very rigorous experience, and you'll have certain points where you'll really have to endure so much. And at those points, if the only purpose that you're there for is to get a few degree credits, then it might not seem as much worth as probably if you're there for that very experience itself. So just wanted to conclude with that.
Yep, yep, definitely. Thanks a lot for those remarks, Roop. And thank you once again for taking the time out for this session.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity, Abhishek.
I have ended the stream from